I, Anushka Bajpayee, Quality House Vice Captain.
Welcome you all to the digital platform of BHIS Council Chronicles.
Billabong High International School has always been innovative with respect to its extracurricular activities.
BHIS Chronicles, time and again, has been making lovely endeavors to open the arena of widespread knowledge throughout the vast spectrum of speakers from different fields.
BHIS Student Council takes the initiative with an enterprising and informative session with Mr. Akshat Sinha.
He is a mechanical engineer who completed his bachelor's and master's degree from RPFU Moscow in Russia in 1998. He worked in the corporate world until 2006, which is when he decided to retire at the age of 33.
He pursued a one-year diploma in Fine Arts 2008 to 2009 and has since then been working and experimenting in the field of art and creativity. He has exhibited paintings in group shows and has held 2 personal solo shows.
Not wasting much time, let's ask our guest speaker to speak magniloquently on this topic, which will lead us to give approbation for his magnificent work.
We would like to welcome our guest speaker for the day, Mr. Akshat Sinha, who will throw light on a rendezvous with an engineer turned artist.
Welcome, sir, on the digital platform of BHIS Council Chronicles. We would request you to resolve our certain queries.
Right. Thank you so much. Before we get into the queries, I would like to thank Billabong High School, and in person, I would like to thank Dr. Smita, who's been coordinating, and I would like to thank you, Neo, and Anushka. I really look forward to the session. I'd like to also thank Vikramjit, who connected me, and I really look forward to a session where the children who are a part of this will get something to gain out of this whole experience. So please go ahead, and thank you so much for having me here.
So our first question. Sir, I am curious to know about the full form of the institution from where you received your master's and bachelor's degree.
Right. So RPFU is Russian People's Friendship University. When I joined the university in 1991, I was on a scholarship from the Indian government. It was still called the People's Friendship University, and it was in the name of Congo revolutionary, Patrice Lumumba. So the name kind of changed twice during these years, and now it is called the Russian People's Friendship University.
Sir, I would like to know your experience in Russia. From where did you do your mechanical engineering? How is it different from India and in what ways?
So I did my schooling in Delhi and from Delhi Public School, R.K. Puram. When I got an opportunity to go to Russia, obviously it was a very high point of my life. I was bubbling with excitement. I was still 17 years old, looking at the world, and with eyes like saucer. I mean, wide-eyed, and I was looking to absorb everything that came my way. So when I reached Russia, actually, if you look at the historical concept, Russia came to existence as Russia in 1991. The breakup of the USSR came around in 91, and 4 days after the coup, and where everything had been changed, and now it was Russia. I landed in Moscow at my university. Times were not the greatest at that, for the next 1 year, where the Russians were, be it food, be it any other thing, were not in big supply because the country was trying to realign itself with the new identity that it had created for itself. But over the years, I really loved my experience. One very good thing that came out of it was my entire education was in Russian language. So the first year was dedicated to the language, and then all my education was in Russian. So apart from the mechanical engineering degrees that I received, I also got a very good foundation in terms of Russian language, which I have used extensively beyond that in translations, interpretations, live simultaneous synchronous interpretations for delegations, be it corporates or defense or ministry when they have visited India or otherwise. I think the comparison would be a little difficult to make because I never really studied in an Indian institution for a number of years to say that how it would compare. But I can compare from the experiences of my friends and my colleagues who had gone on to study at IIT or any other institute in India. uh, I'm sure one thing that was very big difference, and I think that the Indian education policies are changing quite a bit in that way. My education in my university was very holistic. So what would happen is that I studied history, I studied a lot of other subjects which would not have been necessarily a part of an engineer's course curriculum. But Russia is very it's very forward in that way, where I think they understand that the uh, individual's upbringing in terms of all subjects, understanding of life as such is very, very important, which I think relates a lot to our Indian, ethos from the past also. Today, we are again, coming back to that thing where art and social sciences and all are becoming a part of uh, any kind of curriculum that is being taught. So I think this is something which is a good change. I welcome it. Uh, Apart from that, I think one thing I would like to mention is that when I did my first solo exhibition, it was called Those Golden Years, or in Russian, it was Te Zalatiye Godi, which was a representation of my years spent in Russia as a student while I was studying there. And I tried to make it more generic in terms so that anybody who looked at it could relate to it. So anybody who would have been with friends while studying, who could have been traveling with his friends, who could have been studying with his friends, they would all be able to relate to that exhibition, which had 24 paintings and three installations, which were basically memorabilia that I had collected over the years, ranging from my student I card, my library card, my mark sheet, my books that were from there. There were also stubs from the tickets that I had gone to the opera or to the Bolshoi Theatre and all. So all these were triggers for memories, and that is what I had tried to capture in my exhibition. Because I believe that for an individual, when you get to go to any institution to do your higher studies, that is the age where you suddenly have the money available to yourself, and in circumstances where people are not conducting their education, higher education in the same place where they are from, they would be in a hostel or a post or in a PG accommodation. So they start to learn how to lead their own life by experimentation, by learning how you handle yourself with the new rights that you have and the freedom to take responsibility for your actions also. So I think this period is very important, and for all school children, I would suggest enjoy what you are doing, try to learn as much as you can, and enjoy your time as you come, because nothing like studying. That's, I think, that will remain my golden period of my life. I'm sorry, that was a long answer, but yeah, I thought it had to be said.
So, what happened in your life that there was a
Hmm.
sudden metamorphosis from engineering to fine arts in 2006, as you had been working in a corporate world?
Yeah. So, Neo, what happened was that I came back to India in the year 2000, and till 2006, I had my own consulting firm. Uh, I was doing well in terms, I mean, whatever is required. I was engaged with the networking with the best people. We had accounts like Wipro and Airtel and Bharti and all, and we were quite settled where we were in terms of the organization that we were. It was exciting to do what we were doing. The money was good, but somewhere there was this thought where I started to think about beyond a job to a career, as to what do I want to look at in a long term basis. What do I want to do in my life? That's, I think, one of the reasons. So I retired in 2006. Now I can say I retired. At that moment, I simply quit whatever I was doing, and I started to search as to what I want to do in my life. And that took me almost 2 years to decide what to do. And it was a chance, old canvas that was lying of my mother because she used to paint long time back. And when I was very young, she would get me to paint canvases as gifts to my school friends. And this is, when I was like 8, 10, or 12 years old. I'd won the Shankar's art competition at some point in time, but these things had all, kind of gone onto the subconscious. That was but not actively a part of my life at that moment. So when I saw that canvas, I started painting on it, and then I realized that I was enjoying the process. So the process became important to me, and that's when I went in and I did a professional 1-year course, diploma course, because I realized that the technical aspect is very important to if I want to pursue this. So the change actually came where I started to look, actually to search as to what I want to do in my life. And that path kind of led me to art, and it's evolved since then. Yeah.
Sir, please do share about your PG diploma in arts.
So the PG diploma was quite recent. So what I do is every year I either plan a large project, which would entail a lot of engagement for me, or I plan to upskill myself and try to do different things. In the past, I have for almost 2.5 years, I was learning Japanese language along with Russian and Hindi and English that I know, because I liked the language. I wanted to read read the manga and the anime. I wanted to watch it in Japanese itself. So when last year I saw this advertisement by Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts, IGNCA, and I saw that they were doing a 1-year postgraduate diploma in culture management. Now this is very interesting because there aren't many institutes in India who are conducting such kind of a program. So I was quite excited because I was already working as a curator. I was already working as a festival director. So I thought that this would help me to kind of connect, because I had become to do all these activities by experimentation and by how by learning from my process itself. And here was an opportunity to learn how the process can be structured, because the art industry as such is very, very unstructured, unfortunately, and the only way to change it is to become a part of that change. So this course that I did, where we had specialists from architecture, from dance, from theater, from different art forms and roles also, because we had classes on marketing, on communication, everything that would help me to help an individual to groom themselves into a culture manager. So I'm quite happy that unfortunately our final exams had to be held only through assignments because of the corona situation, but they're all complete, and finally we have been told we'll soon have our convocation ceremony, as I have been told, but we're still waiting for a good opportunity to do that. But it was a good course to upskill myself in what I am doing in my life right now. I hope I have answered your question.
Sir, what was your experience like when you were an artist?
Right. Generally, as an artist?
Yes, so what was your experience as an artist?
So I would say that over the last decade or so that I have been involved with art, I have not restricted myself to any one form of art, but and it's my desire that I want to be a master of all, and a jack of all, and not necessarily a master of one. One does not excite me. I mean, that's my personal opinion. I want to experience life and all its beauty through different lenses. Now, this lens could have been poetry. This lens could have been stories. This could be performance, films. So when we speak about art in my life, it has not been restricted only to a perception that people have that art is painting. No, it's not restricted to that for me. I paint, I sketch and I illustrate. I've worked on comics, and I've worked on many different media. All I have been doing is I have worked with other artists who are specialists in that field. You learn with them. There's only so much that you can learn from the books. but you can learn so much from life, and you can learn so much from people who are already a part of it. So I would engage, I would know where they are, conducting some kind of a workshop, or would they take me on as an apprentice. So I would work with them. I would work as an intern. I would work as a volunteer. I used to volunteer with Delhi Street Art project for a long time. I'm still connected with them. No, I don't have that much time to do all projects with them. But as it's a good thing to know new things by being a part of somebody else's journey also. Because by doing that, you start to learn as to what you like and dislike about certain things, and you know it firsthand. It's not something just as a perception. So that's how it has been for me in art. Uh, I mean, I've had two solo exhibitions. I've been a part of, initially, I used to be a part of a lot of group exhibitions with my friends and other artists. And then from that, I realized that I like to organize the entire organization of an exhibition and whatever goes around with it. That also started to become very exciting for me. And I think that's wherein my corporate experience of management, kind of also stepped in. And it helped to see that I could see a lot of other artists were not looking at. So my art practice has not been restricted only to creating the artwork itself, but how it is spoken about, how it reaches the audience, what is the kind of packaging that can be done to an artwork, and the thought and the idea around it, and how can the artist be presented best to the audience. Uh, that's more the kind of role that I'm in these days. Yeah.
Sir, it's very interesting to know that you curate exhibitions and art festivals. Please do share about them.
So my first I actually first curated an exhibition in 2015 at the Lalit Kala Academy in Delhi, and that had 32 international artists. I mean, including India. We had 5 continents out of 7. I mean, barring Antarctica and Africa, we had representation from all continents. We had from US, from UK, from Australia, from Sri Lanka, from Nepal, and all. So, and Delhi and Russia and all. Delhi, I mean India. We had different artists from the Indian subcontinent. Uh, that itself was a very interesting experience where when I wanted to curate 32 artists who are so different, they don't know each other. How do I make them connect? So as a curator, my role was first to select the best artist. Then it was to select the best artwork of that artist. How do I select the artworks which will look good with each other? So when I started this journey of a curator, I started looking the artwork with the eye of somebody who's designing the entire space. Because an exhibition is put up in a space. It's put up on the walls, sculptures go into the middle, generally, so that you can look at the sculpture from all sides. So this journey when started in 2015, I did a few more exhibitions in India. I traveled to Nepal, came back with a project where Indian and Nepalese artists exhibited in Delhi, and then the same exhibition went to Jaipur also. And 2017, I worked with a Russian company, Artplay Media. They have a wonderful multimedia exhibition platform. I would recommend everybody to go, and you can check it online also. It's called Artplay Media. What they do is they use the artworks of very, very famous modernists across the world. Monet, Van Gogh, Klimt. These are names who are very, very big in the art industry. They took their paintings and their artworks and they made them larger than life, 20 feet, 30 feet, and not just static. They were all animations. They were all moving around you. So it became an experience. And this was, so I was, very thrilled to be a part of that project when it traveled to Delhi in 2017. I was a part of that. And 2017 itself, I took a show of Indian contemporary artists to Russia for so they have an art fair called Art Russia 2017. It happened in a city called Nizhny Novgorod. In that city, so 6 of us Indians, we traveled, but we took 349 artworks of 44 artists. and ours was the second largest stall in the entire exhibition space. And Russians are generally known for very large spaces and large things, and we still stood out. We had a lot of response. What I tried to do there was, everyone in India has a stereotype. Everywhere around the world, people have a stereotype about or a perception about Indian art. They expect textile, they expect, things which will be figurative, Ajanta, whatever they might have seen, but they assume that India is limited to that, while India is so much more. So I specifically chose people who were, people who were working on comics. So I took their illustrations, page panels. Then I had people who were photographers who were working with photographs and using Photoshop to manipulate and create certain experiences with that photograph. I had people who were working with wire on canvas. I had people who were using different themes to, different papers, different inks, and using different medium to express different ideas. So everybody who came to our stall said that this was a new India that they saw. New in the sense that this is something that they had not expected out of an Indian pavilion. So that for me was a very satisfying experience. Since then, again, I've been doing a few shows in Delhi. I've done a festival called Identity Art Marathon. I am for the last 2 years, which now I'm trying to convert into an online ongoing festival, which has multiple disciplines within itself. So last 2 years, I used to rent a gallery in Delhi, the Arpana Kaur Fine Art Gallery in Shreveport. And that gallery, I would you take for 24 days, split it into 4 exhibitions of 6 days each. And while the exhibitions are on, I would conduct workshops, performances, stand-up comedy, bhakt kathak, poetry happening there, a workshop on face casting POP, or of a resin workshop, or how to make covers for a book. So we used to, the whole point being that the philosophy that I have shared, that I want to explore different things in life. I want to get audience also to explore different things, at the same time. So so with this, the journey is still on. I still curate a few things. Unfortunately, because of the COVID situation and the social distancing norms, we are not able to do any physical exhibitions as such. But just before the lockdown, I was made the curator for the Suraj Kund Art Fest, which couldn't happen because of the COVID. We are hopeful that it will happen next year. Things will be better, and yeah, there are a lot of exciting things still up ahead. I hope I've answered you, Neil.
Yes. Sir, we know that you do street art and comics. Sir,
Yeah.
how was your experience in doing street art and comics? So how
So
was the
like I was
experience?
like I was mentioning, I saw a post on Facebook. I think this was about 2012 maybe. I saw a post from the Delhi Street Art Group that they were looking at, they were inviting artists to come and paint the garbage bins in Lodi Garden in Delhi itself. So I thought it's a very interesting thing. Let me try that. So I went there and I got introduced to a lot of graffiti artists, lot of artists who work on walls. And I have, worked with Delhi Street Art. We painted a few walls in Gurgaon, in Delhi, and different places. It's not just about painting. It's not just about putting it out there. While you are painting, you have so many people you interact with. And Delhi Street Art that place works very well. People from the street, if they want to be a part of that also, they can become. They can pick up a brush. You can tell them that, this is what I'm thinking. Can you put this color here? So they become a part of it, because the citizen becoming a part of their own city is the best way to make sure that they will take care of it. Because if you have painted a wall, you will make sure nobody is spoiling that wall also. And in a way, you are beautifying your own area. You are making it more personalized. Otherwise, what we see is, long walls which are, white or gray or peach color or, yellowish color, and they are just, running these walls. For an artist, that's like a canvas, that's such an amazing space to paint. I can pick up larger brushes. I can look at it from far. So when you're working as an artist in a studio, you're generally working on small things because that's what you can can put into a studio. I mean, maximum you'll be working on a 5 feet by 8 feet, or depending on the kind of studio that you have. But here you have an opportunity to work on 10 feet by 30 feet. I mean, the wall is long or the wall is high. You can get on top of a scaffolding, specially put up there, and start to paint very high up in there. And then imagine if somebody is downstairs, so you have to plan for it. How will it look? What proportions do I need to keep into perspective so that whoever looks at it is able to understand what I have made. So it should not be a disfigured body because you're looking at it from very, I mean, from the ground, and the artwork is actually 30 feet high, like the Gandhi at the Delhi headquarters in, the police headquarters in Delhi. I didn't paint that, yeah, just say. But it's just one such example where you have to be careful as to if it is so high, how do you make it relatable? And comics has been, phenomenal. When the first Comic Con happened in Delhi, I was a part of that from that first year itself. We came out with comics, and just not even 1 month. I think about 20 days before it was going to happen, we came to know that the first Comic Con will happen at the Delhi Heart in Delhi at INA. And I got together with a lot of friends, and then we decided, okay, let's try and make something out. So there were a few collaborations. One writer got together with an artist, and then they collaborated, created the story. We came out with, an anthology, a collection of different short stories and all. From then on, we have a lot of groups that we have created. I think comic industry works very well as collaborators. So you will have somebody who's a colorist only, somebody who's purely an inker, purely somebody who's making the layouts, and purely somebody who's writing it, and there's book design. So there are so many people who come together, and everybody is, helps each other out and takes them forward. So we have this collective called Ulta Soch, where we look at life in a different way. We said, comics always the writer writes first, and then the illustrations are made. We will think in reverse. We will Ulta Soch it. We will have the images first, and then let's see what the writer can come up with there if there are a set of images. So we created a set of 20 images, and we came out with our first book called Ulta Soch. It was called Skull Stories. So we had 3 different writers. We had one writing in Hindi, one in English, and I wrote in Russian. So all 3 wrote independently. We didn't know what the other is writing. So we actually had 3 stories, running through those 20 pages. I used that same set of images and created a Russian fairy tale. Then from that, 3 years back, we came out with the Ulta Soch Volume 2, which was now larger. We had more collaborators. We had 5 different sets of images. We had people writing in Spanish also, in Catalan also, English, Hindi, and Russian were obviously there. So it became almost a 200-page book, to 220 pages book, and with images, juxtaposed with text. Because text is also image, right? When you have different scripts, like Hindi is written in Devanagari script. The English language has its own script, and Russian has its Cyrillic script. And all these scripts, when they, stand with each other on the same page, they are also an imagery when they are pasted there. So say somebody does not understand Russian, Hindi, or English, or any that language, they see only symbols that do not make a meaning to them. But all design and anything that is there will still make some meaning to you. So this is the beauty of comics. They allow you this large world where you can imagine anything and you can visualize it. So it's an interesting experience being in that industry.
Sir, how did you happen to form so many organizations? That is very wonderful to know. Please do tell about them.
So Anushka, I have always been, on the lookout for collaborating with people, and I have realized that an informal way also works to collaborate with people, and it's a good starting point. But the moment you start having structures, there is a possibility to do larger things, and there is a possibility to get more people involved into that project. So like I have my own company called Untitled Creations Private Limited. We've published comics through that. We're able to raise funds to publish 3 comics through that separately, publish and print them. And we've done the I Am the festival that I was talking about. The initiative is under Untitled Creations only. There is Ulta Source that I spoke about the comics. Then there is Ink Lab. Ink Lab is, so it's spelled Ink, INKLAB. So it's a kind of double take. So you have Ink Lab and you have Inkalab. So you kind of the two things come together. So those were stories or short stories of a slightly revolutionary nature. How do you speak about things which are not common? How do you speak about? And it's a zine. It's a magazine kind of thing. Just short stories coming together. So that group is there. I think the first group that I was a part of was called Art Meet, and it was just random. Facebook was not. I think it happened. Facebook was there already, or maybe it was an Orkut when we started. You would not even know that there was some platform called Orkut, which was the first, kind of initial platform for social networking. And this art meet was just random people would say, okay, on this Saturdays at such and such time, let's all the artists meet at this spot, and we will come and we will paint or write together, and let's see how we can. Let's just come and enjoy, together, because there are not many places to create art and no other artists. So we would meet at India Habitat Center, we would meet at India Gate, we would meet at the Delhi Heart. We'd go to different places, sit down, draw something, talk to other people. I remember Art Meet happened, then we created another one because we just wanted to. It was called Art Talk. Then we had there's a group in Bangalore, Pencil Jammers. So a friend of mine, he created the Delhi Pencil Jammers group, DPJ. So the Pencil Jammers in Delhi started to meet quite often, and there were a lot of graphic designers and product designers who were there. And yeah, so it's been exciting to collaborate with people, and that's the most important thing for me personally. I create all these things so that there is an ecosystem that gets created, and there's more structure as to what we do, and this is what keeps me going with creating more organizations and collaboration. Right.
So, with your diverse experience on how important is art in our lives as a juxtaposed with other disciplines?
So as I was mentioning, I believe that, unfortunately, a lot of time, I mean, in our education system, uh, there has been no cross movement from disciplines. If it's commerce, it's purely commerce. If science, it's purely science. While that's not how an individual works, right? An individual might have an interest in economics, but might also be looking at something like painting, but might also be really interested in chemical, chemistry and all. So how do you combine all of these together? Can this be allowed? Art in itself, I have always believed, and it is my belief still, uh, art should not be a separate subject. Art should be a part of the curriculum as everything. Tell me something. If you have a subject like biology, are you not making the diagrams anymore? Are you not making anything? Can that not be termed as an initiation into art? So if that is the way it is, and Indians generally have lived with art as a part of their life, not as a separate subject itself. There have been people who have pursued it. When you like something more, you start and pursue it. And that is understandable. If you want to understand the techniques or the skills on how to paint or how to sculpt, then I can understand you require that specific understanding. Then you need to learn it from somewhere. I totally get that. But to be able to express, and I would again like to say that art is a skill and art is a verb. Most often we use art as a noun. We take it as the product which has been created from the process of art. Art is my skill. If it is the art of war, people are talking about the skill of war. They're not talking about the product, which is the devastation that war leaves. But when we talk about art, most people think it's a painting or it's a sculpture. No, I think that art is the process of creating that sculpture. It is the process of creating that painting. So that ideation process and that creation process is very personal to each artist. And that is the life cycle. Any artwork will have two life cycles. It will have a life cycle where the artist is creating it, and that is the pure engagement of the artist with the artwork using his art. But once the artwork is created and it is displayed for the audience, or it is available, say on Facebook or Instagram or any other places, there's another life cycle of that product. That artwork is now being consumed by the audience, and the audience decides what they like or they don't like, or what they see in that artwork. But at no point of time do I believe that these are, always in the same space. They can be two separate altogether. One person can see a landscape and the other person can see human figures in that, if it is an abstract piece. And and the subject can also mean different things to different people. So I think art should be a part of everything that we do in our life. Like sports, I believe playing, running around, physical activity, this is something that should be a part of everything. Why can't we learn about physics in our sports ground? I know that I'm talking about things which are not necessarily done today. Although there are a lot of innovations and effort that is being made by the ministries, by the people who are educators, by our school teachers as well, and they try to make it all the more exciting and something that we relate to and understand because we want to understand. My fondest memories will be of my teachers from my school and from my university, because they have given me something which is just beyond wonderful. They have given it without any expectation. I mean, they expect me to understand and respond back, but they do it out of their pure true heart, and I'm really thankful to all teachers out there. Yeah.
Sir, who is your favorite artist?
My favorite artist. So in India, I think my favorite artist is Ganesh Pine, Ganesh, and Pyne. That's how his name is spelled. And just today I was talking to a friend of mine, and he's from Patna, but he studied in BHU, and he just showed me some of his drawings, and I said, this looks like works of Ganesh Pine, and he was like, wow, he's my favorite artist, and I have met him once, and I was so jealous at that point of time because I never got to meet Ganesh Pine. Unfortunately, he's no more with us, but his works are beautiful, and he was in government service while he was making those artworks. He did not have much time, so he would scribble around in the books, and so they would, not all the works, I mean, he was painting also separately, but if a person wants to create and suddenly have an idea, whatever is nearby, you use that surface to outpour your emotion. But he is wonderful with his lines. That Ganesh Pan, I think, is my favorite in India. Generally worldwide, I like Klimt. Gustav Klimt is one artist who's, again, the beauty of it that he tries to create is something that I've liked. Then there's a Russian artist, Vasily Vereshchagin. He used to create, so he came to India as a soldier, but he used to paint as well. And he captured a lot of these elephants decked with all the ornaments and the splendor of the Maharajas. And he has also captured the outcome of war. And he's a very sensitive artist, and he created very, very large works also. So Vereshchagin is I think he would be one of my favorites. And Van Gogh. I mean, how can I forget Van Gogh? I mean, just his history and just the way he created everything, despite the problems that he had in his life and struggling with, he was not able to comprehend a lot of times what he was thinking, but he was able to create such beautiful pieces and completely change how people looked at paintings, because things were changing. Cubism was happening, everything was happening. But in that era, I think not in his lifetime because he died too early in his years. But after that, I think people still remember his work. Starry, Starry Night is one of his very, very beautiful works. Yeah.
Sir, our queries.
Yeah.
Sir, our queries are finished. So now we would like to ask the audience if they have any questions.
I think there were a few in the chat box. I don't know. I've not seen
Yes.
them, but there were a few in the chat box.
Yes, sir. So Yashvi Gaur is asking, how was your study at Russia and was it difficult?
So, I mean, I explained certain things that there is so much more that I can tell. You know, Moscow, just by its climate, is so very different from Delhi. Delhi can be cold, and a 0 degree or a 2 degree in winters is really chilling in Delhi. But it was minus 25, when it was in Moscow. So the Moscow winters were completely different. So trying to understand how to, and summers would be really hot also. So we had 20, 25 degrees plus in summers and minus 25, 30 in winter. So there was a big change. And that used to be, difficult. Initially, the language was I mean, it was not a problem because in my sixth, seventh, and eighth class, I had Russian language as, as my third language. And I didn't know that I was going to land up in Russia, but what happened was I knew all the alphabet. I didn't know all the words, but I could read everything that was written. I could not make a meaning because my vocabulary was not that good. But we had a friend, there were 17 of us in my batch in my university, Indians in my batch, uh, of whom one had a Ukrainian mother, and he could not read or write for whatever reason, I don't know, but he knew all the words. So he knew, he could understand what was being said. So I would read and he would translate for us. And this is how we used to go around the city when we used to explore it in the metro and everything. There were a lot of, so many beautiful things. I mean, going in a metro in 91, it was completely different. I used to take 3 transports to get from my hostel to my engineering building, because we had a large campus at one space where we had the hostels, and then in different parts of the city we had different faculties and different departments. So I used to take the actually used to take the bus first to the metro station. Then I took the metro to the nearest metro station there. Then I would take a, a either a tramway, or I would walk to the the university department there. So yeah, that was a daily exercise. So when you ask about what was difficult, I think learning difficult, the language itself, because we had to understand uh, everything in Russian. So be it the mathematical operands, or it was chemistry or physics. Before we could start off learning engineering, we had to learn how basic we would be able to understand the terminology and the normal language, also to talk to people, to be able to express. I think language was one, uh, but I think in 1 year, which is the preparatory faculty, we would come to a point where we were able to converse and we could increase our vocabulary. So 1 year was purely just Russian. And in my university, one good thing was we had students from, at that time, from 140 countries. Now I think it's risen to 181 countries, or 170 if I'm not wrong. So we had people from different walks of life whose their own mother tongues or native languages would be French, or from Congo, or from Swahili, or so people would come with different backgrounds from Cambodia, from Vietnam. We would have these people, and they would speak completely different languages. But Russian was the only language that we could all converse in. After about 3-4 months, when we started to realize that the only easy way to talk to each other is through Russian. So this helped us to also learn the language faster. So which is why I say that if you want to learn a language, going there and learning it there is a big difference, because when you go to the shop, you have to converse in Russian or in that language, right? If I have to buy milk, I have to buy bread, I have to go somewhere and I have to ask for directions, it's all going to be in that language. And all your friends, they speak Russian. So we had a large, in the hostels, we would have one person from Russia as a compulsion, and the other two could be from different countries. This whole point being that now you have to converse in Russian. So that language came easily, but it took some effort for everyone. Language was one difficulty. I think the weather was another difficulty. Initial couple of years of when the USSR had broken down and Russia came into place, there were a lot of restructuring happening. So there were certain issues at that point of time. But then, all in all, it's been a wonderful experience. I mean, I'm very thankful, that this happened in my life and I could go to Russia to learn. And And that's one thing, a lot of people actually, when I decided to switch to art, a lot of people ask me, you're an MTech. Why would you want to go into this? What about your education? Is it a waste? And that's where I would like to say that education is never a waste. Whatever you read, whatever you learn, it will come of some purpose to you. I know that, we don't use trigonometry in everything that we are doing, right, in life. But that does not mean that the trigonometry was not in. It gives you logic. It gives you an understanding of how things work. So if I have not read about, the history of certain areas, I would not be aware of them. So tomorrow, if I, as an artist and a writer, I want to write about a subject or a protagonist or a character who is based out of South Africa, I need to do my research. And if I know some people in South Africa, I know what, some things from them. There is a starting point. And this is just an example that I've taken. But I would like to say that never in life think that what you have learned will go to waste. If nothing, it is an experience that you have in your life. If you're not using it directly, but you will always have the benefit of people you have interacted with during that process when you were learning it. And so it's important to keep learning, keep updating, and have this thirst to find new things and to be able to do something for yourself. Yeah.
Sir, Smita ma'am is asking how much time did you take to learn the Russian language and was it difficult?
So as I was saying that the language is definitely very different from what we from Hindi or English. But the fact that I knew both Hindi and English well helped me a lot, because the alphabets are quite similar to the English alphabet, although Cyrillic alphabets are also there. The reversed R, this is pronounced like ya, and there are other things. But Russian language is also very close to Hindi in the sense, or to Sanskrit, you can say that it has the same kind of grammar rules that it has, and also that it is a very phonetic language. What we write and what we speak is very close, except that they have their exceptions. That is one problem with Russian language, that there are many, many exceptions. So they would first tell us the rule and then give us 30 exceptions for that. So that was, so need to know all those exceptions, how to use them. Just an example, they don't have to be 30 every time. But the language is very beautiful. And the good part is that so much beautiful, wonderful literature has been written, with the language, that once you have this language and you start reading Chekhov and Tolstoy, and their poet Yesin, and so it is beautiful what they have written in their language directly. There have been many translations, and I have read translations in Hindi. I have read translations in English. I'm sure you would have read the plays of Chekhov or Tolstoy or anyone, and or tried in you have Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, I think. So, but the whole point being that translation is never able to grasp the actual meaning of the writer, because they have a context in the language. So once I started reading that literature in that language, it's completely different. Or you look at the Russian films and you don't have to look at the subtitles. That's such a relief. So yeah, it does help.
Sir, I believe all the audience and our queries have been completed, and we have understood everything that you wanted us to understand.
Right.
So
that's wonderful. I think we are coming to the close of it. I have two questions. Can I ask
yes.
questions? I think Agastya Saha is from Fifth and asking, how did you cope with the Russian weather? I think that's what Agastya is saying, right?
Yes.
So we used to wear a thermal innerwear. Then we used to wear a shirt or a t-shirt, and then we would have the half sleeve sweater, then the full sleeve sweater, and then a jacket, and then we would have an overcoat over that. Then we would have gloves. We would have double socks. Then we would have those special shoes which would have a lining inside them. Then we would have a cap that would cover our ears, and then we would have a scarf that would definitely cover our throat, because the forehead, the forehead and the throat are the two main areas that you need to safeguard when you are in the cold climate. Cold was never a problem for me. My problem used to be when there was like intermediary thing. When it is actually, so water in the normal city would not freeze till -4. Although 0 degrees is freezing point, but it would be like a slush. So it became very, very difficult. And whenever there's a breeze and it goes over slush kind of material where it is not pure ice, they are really chilly. So I used to hate that period. -10 was good. -10 used to be good because everything is pure ice. The snow all around you has frozen completely. So you can look at it and it's beautiful. You can cover yourself. And then inside in all the rooms and the buildings, they were all centrally heated. They used to have this pipelines that you would send steam to each of the into the rooms and to the buildings, keeping them warm. That used to be quite easy to handle. Do we have another question? I think I saw a question there. Nude, is there a question there? Inbuilt firebox is what Agastya is. I think that's a follow-up question to Agastya's question about the cold.
Yes.
Not a fireplace, because fireplace not everybody could afford, and it would have been very, very difficult, especially in the hostels. And I think they were modernized beyond that already in the cities. They had this steam pumping stations, every few in each locality, and in each room and building they would have these special pipes and batteries, they used to be called, which would be pumped with the steam. So that would keep everything, kind of warm. You did not need to necessarily have a fire burning to keep you. But yeah, that was also, we used to do that in the summer houses, although they weren't very feasible to, approach during the winters because there would be a lot of snow around. But if we would go to a friend's, summer house, outhouse kind of place, there obviously you needed fire to help you to survive, because not all outhouses had that, electricity or the facility of a steam, central heating. Yeah.
Thank
I
you
think
so
there was a question on games. I think there was a question on games. I don't know.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Dr. Smita, I would just like to share that, there are obviously like each culture has their own games. Russia would also have a lot of their own games, per se. A difference between sports and games is, I think, obvious to everyone. So, but if you talk about games, they have their own cards, which have a different suit. They don't have the jack and the queen and the king. They have a different, identification of those cards, and the games are slightly different. They could be similar to, something that we play in India as a rummy or something else, but they are their own kind of games. So the card games are very famous where, and people play that with each other. Agastya is also asking if I'm a sand artist. No, I am not a sand artist. That is one thing that I have not been able to do. I built a lot of sand castles on the beach, but I am not a sand artist. I know a few sand artists, especially in Odisha, and they create wonderful, sand art. I know an artist in St. Petersburg, Russia. He's a very young artist. He works with ice sculpture. That's also quite beautiful. I mean, when they sculpt ice, and they can, we can't do it in our climate, but they can do that. That's also quite interesting. But sand art is very beautiful thing to see, and once you get the hang of it, it's really beautiful to look at. Yeah.
So one more question has come up from Agastya only. Why in India it's not mandatory for foreigners to know our national language?
I think we have to start off with understanding that India itself does not have a national language. We have the official languages which are a part of our system. I don't think that any, but I know, having said that, I can tell you that I know a lot of foreigners who know Hindi. My own batchmate, who was a Russian, he learned Hindi from us. He learned Arabic from his other friends. He knew Italian, he knew Spanish. So this was his own initiative to learn a lot of things from others. I know a lot of people who come to India for their studies, and they study the subject either in English, because in India, uh, I think this is a colonial, something that has stayed back. I don't know if it is right, wrong, or how we can change this. I would not want to take this opportunity to make any such claim. But English, as of now, has become a common bridge amongst the different parts of the country and the different states. We have so many languages. And I would love to know many more Indian languages and dialects, because each language is a window to that culture. Language is always from a region, and I think what was never done in India was that we did not have one language for the nation. I don't know if it is a good thing or a bad thing, but in Russia they used to have Russian as the second language in even republics which have now broken away, and they still speak that language, be it Uzbekistan, or the other countries, Kazakhstan and all. So they would still be able to understand Russian. So that became the common factor. In India, I don't think Hindi still enjoys that kind of a support from all the regions in India, because the local languages that are used are more prevalent there, and absolutely they have a right to do so. Our constitution gives us the right to do so. So the foreigners coming to India and not learning a language, I don't know why they don't. They should learn some Indian language at least. It will give them some more perspective to know about things.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, for your stimulating answers, which was indeed a revelation.
Our heartfelt gratitude to our founder and CEO, Mrs. Preeti Agarwal, for initiating such talks, which kindles in us the curiosity and deepens our knowledge.
We convey our gratitude to our speaker, Mr. Akshat Sinha, for the dynamic talk.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much. Yes, sir.
Anushka and Neo, especially for conducting this session. You've conducted it very well. Thank you to Dr. Smita and everybody who's been involved to get this done. And thanks a lot to Ms. Preeti Agarwal also for taking this initiative and doing this, because this is a very, very important thing. You are all at a very impressionable age, where all these things will help you to realize and stay hungry for more, because this need to know more is something that should stay forever in our lives. I wish all the children who have joined today to have a wonderful life. Know what you want to do, and to know what you want to do, you should learn more. No, unfortunately, there is no other way other than experiencing and learning. So all the best to everyone, and thank you for having me today.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Vedant.
We will meet again with Mr. Akshat Sinha next week on 10th October 2020 at the same time. So, till then, stay home, stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.